Hello, this is Final Flame Productions, back with another movie-related video. Today I tackle the subject of Spider-Man leaving the MCU and going back to Sony. He was always kind of with Sony even when he was in the MCU, but it was a kind of a deal between both of them. Really the main, from what I gather, they kind of run the roost. Sony's input, I'm sure, was minimal, if any, in terms of the direction they would take it. And if you've seen my other video, I did a video quite a while back, well, not that long ago, whenever Spider-Man Far From Home was released. I think I released one for Homecoming as well, describing my hatred is a strong word, but I did not like the new Spider-Man movies. I didn't like Homecoming. I really didn't like Far From Home. That's a pretty unpopular opinion with most people. Most people seem to like those movies a lot. They've done pretty well. The newest one has done really well, Far From Home, as far as I know. But today's video, I really want to say that, I've looked at the opinions of people. I've looked at the reaction online from people about this news that Spider-Man won't be in the MCU going forward and that he's coming back to Sony, and most people seem to be really, really angry at it. And this is kind of not that surprising because Far From Home was a big hit, Homecoming was too. But I'm surprised that there's not more people that share my opinion, that essentially my opinion on the two recent Spider-Man movies is that I think the MCU have kind of neutered Spider-Man. They've kind of taken away a lot of the things that I liked about the last 5 Spider-Man movies. I wasn't a big fan of Spider-Man 3, Amazing Spider-Man. I wasn't that big a fan of either. I thought 1 and 2 were really good. I thought Amazing Spider-Man 2, again, it's not a popular opinion, I thought it was quite entertaining. It's a bit of a mess in parts. But I thought Homecoming was very good in parts. The part of Michael Keaton was really good. Tom Holland had moments that he felt like Peter Parker. But again, the forced humor, that sort of kind of Big Bang Theory humor is maybe a little bit offensive, but it's not far off it. This kind of forced humor where they're always trying to be funny every couple of scenes. I didn't like this friend character, I forget his name, Peter Parker's friend character in these two new movies. I thought Far From Home was a complete mess. I thought there was absolutely no emotional weight to it. There was even when the characters are being attacked and exploded and chased, they're making jokes, they're laughing. I just didn't understand why people raved about this movie, because it got really good reviews. It's doing really well at the box office, Far From Home. I mean, you look at what they did with Aunt May's character. They've just made her into this nothing character that just stands there and really has no opinion, doesn't say anything. You look at the Aunt May character in Spider-Man 1 to 3, the Sam Raimi movies. She wasn't given that much screen time, but she was given some moments of real heart and real important scenes that connected to Peter Parker. Aunt May in the new Spider-Man movies really doesn't need to be there. There is talk that they weren't allowed to use Uncle Ben, which isn't really a fault, I suppose, of the MCU if they're not allowed to use it, but that's for the movie themselves, it really kills any of that dimension to the movie, because Uncle Ben is such a big part of the Spider-Man series. So in terms of Sony getting Spider-Man back, I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's potentially a very good thing, because I really enjoyed Venom, and Venom arguably was a bigger hit than Homecoming. I think they roughly made the same amount, but Venom had a smaller budget, and that's not something that people bring up that much. So people think that because Sony's getting Spider-Man back, they're going to make another flop of a movie. But they just made Venom, which was a big hit. They made Into the Spider-Verse, which was a big hit, and possibly was the best Spider-Man movie since Spider-Man 2. So the idea that Sony is somehow going to ruin Spider-Man, I suppose that's based on what you think is ruining Spider-Man. I think that the past 2 Spider-Man movies that MCU did have ruined him worse than any Andrew Garfield movie. I think they've shown that they have some interesting ideas coming along with Andy Serkis making Venom 2. I just don't. I don't agree that the last two Spider-Man movies were good movies. I think the first one was maybe Homecoming was okay, but I thought Far From Home, whether you think it was a good movie, I don't think it was a good Spider-Man movie. I think it lacked any of the heart, any of the emotion, any of the real moments of, I don't think in 10 years people are going to be talking about Far From Home, whereas I think in 10 years people will still remember the Sam Raimi movies, and that's a problem with a lot of MCU movies. They might be entertaining to people, but do they really remember much of it months, a year down the line? People might say they do, but other than something like the first Avengers, other than Iron Man, other than a select few other movies, some of the recent movies have been really, really poor. Even Endgame, I thought was a bit of a mess, a bit of a hodgepodge that got a lot of love, mainly because people maybe invested so much in the rest of the movies. I don't think it necessarily was as good as people think, and I don't think that Sony getting it back is going to be a bad thing. If they mix Venom and Spider-Man and they get good people in there to direct it, like Andy Serkis, that's a good step for Sony. I think that this could possibly give us more accurate Spider-Man movies, less sort of MCU connected movies where Spider-Man's sort of, Iron Man Jr. is the term being put around, and I don't think it's far off. People think it's a little bit of a silly statement to make, but that is really all that Far From Home was. It was, instead of Uncle Ben, you had Tony Stark in the background, and that didn't really sit right with a lot of people. Didn't sit right with me either. So again, I think that Sony getting it back, could end up in tears, but for me and for a select group of people who comment in my last video don't think that the MCU movies are doing it justice. I described the MCU Spider-Man movies as Nickelodeon light, big budget Nickelodeon movies where it's all about silly kiddie humor. There's no real darkness to it. There's no emotional weight. I'm not expecting The Dark Knight or The Punisher, but there's got to be a little bit of emotion. If you look back at the Sam Raimi 1 and 2 movies, even 3, there's some really good emotional moments. There was some depth to the characters. Even Aunt May, who had little screen time, she had a lot to do in those little scenes she got. So I think if people remove their MCU shades and actually look at what Disney has done to Spider-Man, they've kind of done him disservice. He's become a sort of his first two movies have become sort of, other than Michael Keaton's great performance, they're sort of forgettable, flimsy movies that even if you enjoyed and liked, you couldn't say they're movies that are going to last or stand the test of time. Will Sony make better movies? That's up in the air, but I personally don't think they could make any worse than has come in the last two movies. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree? Let me know. Thank you.